The ocean does not shout its stories, it whispers them endlessly, beneath the hum of the tides. If one could listen closely enough, beyond the crash of waves and the hiss of foam, one might hear the murmur of something ancient, something that remembers before memory began. Long before there were cities of stone and iron, before names and nations and maps, there was only water and the slow heartbeat of the earth beneath it. The ocean was not yet a border. It was the beginning. Every shoreline that now defines our world was once only a suggestion, a line drawn in wet sand, destined to be rewritten by the moon. We are born of salt water. The same salinity that runs through our blood once belonged to the sea. It is said that when we listen to the ocean in a shell, we are not hearing the sea at all, but the echo of our own bloodstream. In that resonance lies something deeper than nostalgia. It is recognition. Somewhere within the darkness of our cells, we remember where we came from. Long before we learned to build homes from stone, we built them from silence, from the rhythm of waves, from the lull of the tide that pulled us to sleep before there were walls to shelter us. Every civilization begins with a dream, but perhaps the first dream was not of sky or fire, it was of water. In the ancient murk, where light dissolved into liquid night, something stirred that would one day become us. The ocean was both mother and mirror, shaping our bodies and our myths. We learned its patience before we learned our own. To this day, its tides still dictate the rhythm of our planet's breath. When the full moon rises, the sea leans closer to the land, as if remembering the time when it held everything that would become us. And yet, we stand at the edges of this vast memory and act as if it were alien. We stare across its surface and think of distance, not depth. But beneath that shimmering skin, beneath the blue and the silence, there are places where history sleeps, whole landscapes swallowed by time, mountain ranges softened into seabeds, forests turned to coral and dust. There may even be something more, the traces of hands that built, the outlines of walls, the geometry of intention. The ocean keeps its secrets well, but it keeps them all. It hides not only the bones of ships but the bones of beginnings. Scientists tell us that the sea holds 90% of Earth's living space. It is the true continent, and everything else, our lands, our cities, is but an island in comparison. When we look at the ocean, we are not looking outward, but inward, into the vast interior of our planet's memory. The first city, if it ever existed, may not lie beneath sand or soil but beneath the endless layers of silt and current. There, under the pressure of centuries, its stones could have become indistinguishable from the seabed, its pathways overgrown by coral, its monuments softened into myth. Imagine standing on a shore that no longer exists, one of the great plains that once lay between continents during the last ice age, when sea levels were lower and the air was cold and thin. Perhaps there were fires there, and voices rising over the wind, and hands arranging stones in patterns meant to last. But the sea was patient. It watched. And when the time came, it rose quietly, inch by inch, until the fires went out and the voices were replaced by waves. The ocean does not hurry. It swallows slowly, lovingly, as though reclaiming what was always its own. We have always feared and adored this quiet force. Every myth born on land eventually drifts back to the sea. We give it names, Poseidon, Varuna, Tangaroa, and we imagine its moods as gods and monsters because to face its indifference is unbearable. Yet even in our fear, we sense that the ocean is not a destroyer but a keeper. The drowned things are not lost, only transformed. What we call disappearance is only another form of preservation. An archive without language, a memory without sound. To look upon the ocean is to look upon time itself. Its surface shifts, glimmers, and hides, but its depths remain unchanged, eternal. The same water that carries ships across the globe once lapped against the stones of forgotten shores. It remembers the warmth of the first sunrise reflected on the first city's walls, the laughter of those who thought the sea a friend that would never leave them. It remembers everything, because water forgets nothing. So as we drift closer to sleep, listening to the soft breath of the waves against the shore, we might wonder if the ocean still dreams of that first city. Somewhere beneath the calm blue expanse, perhaps it hums with the pulse of ancient streets, waiting for the right moment, the right silence, to reveal them again. The murmur beneath the waves is not just the sound of moving water, it is the sound of history breathing. And tonight, if we listen long enough, it might tell us who we once were.
The world we know today is only a fragment of what once existed. The lines that separate continents, the coasts that cradle our cities, the beaches we walk along, all of these are temporary outlines in an ever-changing design. Long ago, when the earth was colder and the ice stretched across vast northern lands, the ocean was smaller. Its waters were bound in glaciers, locked in white silence. Sea levels lay hundreds of feet lower, and where water now reigns, great plains once reached toward the horizon. Beneath the waves of today, there were once valleys, forests, and fields where people lived, dreamed, and built. The drowned world is not a myth. It is geological truth. Beneath the North Sea lies Doggerland, a sunken landscape that once connected Britain to mainland Europe. Scientists have traced its rivers and hills through sonar maps, revealing an ancient countryside teeming with life. It was a world of herds and hunters, of small human bands who followed the seasons, who perhaps raised small shrines or carved symbols in wood and stone that are now buried under layers of sand and silt. When the great ice sheets began to melt, the sea came creeping in. Slowly at first, a whisper of water in low valleys, and then faster, surging with each century, until the land disappeared entirely beneath the gray waters of the North Sea. But Doggerland is only one of many lost worlds. All along the continental shelves, where the ocean floor drops steeply into the abyss, there lie traces of ancient coastlines. Off the coast of India, archaeologists have found submerged ruins near Dwarka, structures that seem to mirror the myths of cities swallowed by the sea. Near Japan's Yonaguni Island, underwater terraces and steps cut into stone provoke questions no one can yet answer. Were they carved by nature or by human hands long forgotten? The line between what is made and what is shaped remains blurred beneath the weight of water and time. For tens of thousands of years, humans followed the rhythm of coastlines. The sea was our highway, our food source, our comfort. Settlements grew where rivers met the ocean, places rich with life and promise. But the world was still thawing from the last ice age, and every year, the water rose a little higher. The sea was patient and unstoppable. It took fields first, then forests, then homes. Those who lived near the shore must have watched the tide creeping further inland with each generation, their stories growing heavy with warnings and loss. It is no wonder that so many of our oldest myths speak of floods, of deluges, of gods who wash the world clean. Beneath the poetry of destruction, there may lie the echo of memory. The memory of the world drowning slowly, relentlessly in blue. Imagine the coastlines of that vanished earth. Rivers wider than imagination, deltas that stretch for miles, caves where humans painted not knowing their art would one day vanish beneath the sea. The Mediterranean was smaller then, its shores closer. The Black Sea was once a vast freshwater lake until salt water burst through the Bosporus and turned it into an ocean basin. In a matter of years, entire valleys were submerged. Archaeologists believe villages once stood along its banks, swallowed in an event so sudden and immense it may have inspired one of humanity's most enduring legends, the Great Flood. Each discovery beneath the ocean floor is a whisper from those forgotten landscapes. A tool, a hearthstone, a fossilized root, small, silent testaments to a world erased by the sea's patient hand. Science measures these shifts in centuries and millennia, but for the people who lived them, the change must have been heartbreakingly human. They would have seen their horizons disappear, their sacred places drowned, their world growing smaller each year. The sea was no longer a source of life, but an unstoppable tide of loss. And yet, even as it claimed their homes, it preserved them. The ocean's cold darkness can hold memories that land cannot. Beneath layers of silt, would resist decay, pottery remains intact, footprints press into ancient mud. When scientists recover these traces, they are not just studying the past, they are listening to the faint heartbeat of a world that still exists, buried but breathing. These drowned plains, these lost coastlines, are reminders that civilization did not begin in isolation. The first sparks of settlement, of architecture, of art, may have ignited along shores now lost to view. Perhaps the first city, or something like it, once stood where fish now swim, its walls softened into coral, its streets mapped only by the movements of the tide. If so, then the ocean is not just a graveyard of history, but a hidden archive, a vast library of stone and silence waiting to be read. Every ripple on the surface of the water is an echo of that transformation. Each wave that touches the shore carries a trace of the old world with it, a whisper from the lands that once lay exposed beneath the sun. The ocean remembers not in words, but in currents, in the slow drift of sediment, in the shimmer of bioluminescent light that still pulses where rivers once ran. Tonight, as the tide rises outside and the world sinks into quiet, one can almost feel those old shorelines stirring beneath the deep. The drowned forests of Doggerland, the terraces of Yonaguni, the villages that once ringed the Black Sea, they are all still there, asleep beneath the weight of ages. The echoes of that world have not vanished, they have only been softened by time, absorbed by the rhythm of the waves. If the ocean could speak, it would tell us that nothing is ever truly lost. It would remind us that every continent we walk on was once a seabed, and every sea we gaze upon was once land beneath the sky. The drowned world lies beneath us, vast and patient, waiting for our imagination to return. The tides that erased it are still rising and falling, breathing in the same ancient rhythm that once shaped its shores. And if we listen, truly listen, to the hush between waves, we might hear the faintest echo of footsteps beneath the water, crossing the plains of a world that has not forgotten us. There comes a moment in the story of the earth when silence breaks and everything begins to melt. It is not a single moment that can be pinned to a date, not an instant of catastrophe, but a slow and almost tender transformation, a long breath drawn by a planet awakening from its frozen sleep. The great ice sheets that had covered the northern world began to retreat, their edges glistening like glass under a pale sun. Water ran from their wounds, trickling into rivulets that grew into rivers, that grew into seas. The planet warmed, not in panic, but in rhythm, a rhythm that would change everything. The end of the Ice Age was both a birth and a burial. As the glaciers shrank, they revealed new lands, new valleys, new hopes. But they also released the waters that had been locked away for tens of thousands of years. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the oceans began to rise. The people of that time could not have known the scale of what was coming. They would have seen a little more water each year, a river running stronger, a marsh growing where a meadow once was. At first, perhaps, it was only an inconvenience, the sea taking back a few feet of sand. But as generations passed, villages vanished, coastlines dissolved, and the horizon itself seemed to move closer. The earth was changing its shape, redrawing the map of its memory. Science tells this story in measurements, millimeters per year, degrees per century. But behind those numbers are lives. Imagine a mother watching the tide creep closer to her home, a hunter realizing that the familiar paths to the shore have disappeared under the tide, a child asking why the land feels smaller than it used to. For them, it was not an age of geological transformation. It was an age of loss, an age of endings. The ocean was not rising, their world was sinking. The Holocene sea rise was one of the most dramatic transitions our planet has ever known. In just a few thousand years, sea levels rose by more than 400 feet. Entire continents were reshaped. The Bering Land Bridge that once connected Asia to North America disappeared beneath the Arctic waters, cutting off the paths that the first peoples had taken into the New World. The Sunda Shelf, which had united the islands of Indonesia and Malaysia into a single vast continent, broke apart into thousands of fragments, becoming the archipelago we know today. Doggerland sank beneath the North Sea, its rivers and forests erased from the map. The Earth had begun to look like the world we recognize, but only after swallowing countless landscapes that once carried the first whispers of civilization. Geologists can trace these floods in layers of sand and clay, in the chemical signatures of coral, in the stories written by the isotopes of ice. But there is another record, softer and more fragile, the stories passed down through myth. Across nearly every culture, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the legends of the Maya, from the flood of Deucalion in Greece to the tale of Manu in India. Humanity has remembered the sea's slow vengeance. The details differ: gods, punishments, rebirths, but the core remains the same. The world drowned, and we began again. It is tempting to see these stories as allegory, but perhaps they are history softened by time, the emotional memory of ancestors who watched their world disappear. There must have been moments of terrible beauty as the waters rose. The air would have smelled of salt and thawed earth, the skies bright with migrating birds following new currents. Forests would have fallen to the sea, their roots drifting like black ribbons beneath the waves. The sound of breaking ice would echo across the valleys, not the sharp crack of disaster, but a long, low moan, as if the earth itself were sighing. Rivers that had always flowed in one direction began to change their course, seeking lower ground. And everywhere, water, relentless, rising cold. The ocean does not rage when it takes. It whispers and waits. It moves in patience, in silence, in inevitability. The people who watched their lands vanish would have felt both awe and terror, a quiet reverence for the immensity of what they were witnessing. Perhaps they offered prayers or sang songs to the waves, hoping to appease whatever power had been awakened. They could not have known that the change they feared was also the change that made civilization possible. For as the sea rose, it brought new climates, new coastlines, new patterns of rain and soil. In the chaos of transformation, fertile plains formed, rivers expanded, and humanity found new places to begin again. The loss of one world became the foundation of another. Still, there must have been moments of grief, so deep they felt eternal. The last hunter who stood on the highest ridge of Doggerland, watching the final line of forest sink beneath the gray water. The last child who played on the shores of Sunda before it vanished into tropical blue. The first sailor who returned to find his homeland gone. These were witnesses to the end of an age. The ocean, in its silence, took everything but the memory. That memory lives in us still, a quiet anxiety whenever we hear of rising seas, a tremor in the heart when we see the tide reclaim the sand. If there was a first city, perhaps it was claimed then, not by war or decay, but by the patient hand of the ocean. Its walls might still stand beneath layers of silt, its streets crossed by fish, its altars encrusted with coral. To think of it is to feel a strange comfort, that even the oldest dreams are not lost, only transformed. The city sleeps, as the sea does, deep, eternal waiting. The moment the sea rose was not an apocalypse, but a turning of the page. It was the earth changing the story, reminding us that creation and destruction are the same act told from different sides. As the ice melted, the ocean did what it has always done. It moved, it breathed, it remembered. And somewhere in the deep, beneath the slow drift of centuries, the echoes of those vanished worlds still pulse like a hidden heartbeat. The drowned land is still there, not gone but merely silent, the ocean's memory of its own awakening. There are stories that refuse to die. They drift through time like pieces of driftwood, washing up again and again on the shores of human imagination. Among them, none has lingered longer or deeper than the story of Atlantis, the city swallowed by the sea. For thousands of years, it has haunted the human mind, shimmering between truth and myth, between memory and dream. It is a tale that begins not in fantasy, but in philosophy, with a man named Plato, who spoke not of wonder, but of warning. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE, Plato describes Atlantis as a vast and powerful civilization, rich in wisdom and art, whose pride led to its downfall. He tells us that in a single day and night of misfortune, the island sank beneath the waves and was lost forever. Scholars have debated the meaning of his words for centuries. Was Atlantis a moral allegory, a lesson against arrogance and excess? Or was it a memory, faint and reshaped, of something that truly happened, a recollection of a world that the sea erased? Plato claimed the story came from Egyptian priests, passed down through generations, before reaching the Greek logographer Solon. The Egyptians, after all, were the great keepers of time, their civilization already ancient when Greece was young. They spoke of floods of ages before the Nile, of cities that vanished when the world was remade. Perhaps Plato's tale was not invention, but translation, a myth carried across millennia, reshaped by tongues and minds, yet rooted in something older than writing itself. Modern science has long dismissed Atlantis as legend, but the myth persists because it resonates with something deep within us. Every culture carries a story of a world lost to water, not merely destroyed, but drowned. The Sumerians spoke of Ziusidra, who survived the great flood that ended the Age of Kings. In India, the story of Manu tells of a sacred fish that warned of rising waters. In the Americas, the Maya, Hopi, and Inca each tell of floods that reshaped creation. Why does this story repeat? Perhaps because once long ago it truly happened, not as punishment, but as physics, as ice melting under the slow heat of a new sun. The myth of Atlantis could be the echo of that shared memory, a collective recollection of the time when the sea rose and claimed the world's first homes. When the earth warmed and coastlines shifted, when valleys became estuaries and plains became seabeds, people must have told each other stories to explain the loss. They would have spoken of cities swallowed by angered gods, of worlds punished for pride, because to face the indifference of nature is unbearable. Myths are the way grief becomes language. But what if Atlantis is not just a symbol of loss? What if it is a remembrance of something extraordinary that truly existed? Beneath the waters of the Mediterranean, near Santorini, archaeologists have uncovered the ruins of Akrotiri, a Bronze Age city destroyed by volcanic eruption and buried in ash. Its frescoes, stairways, and streets speak of a sophistication that could have inspired Plato's imagination. Some point to Minoan Crete, with its palace of Knossos and its maritime empire, as the seed of the legend. Others turn to far older possibilities, to the submerged plateaus near the Azores, or to the mysterious terraces of Yonaguni. Each theory feels both too small and too grand, as though the truth lies somewhere not in place, but in pattern. Atlantis may never be found because it was never just a single city. It might have been many: Doggerland's drowned villages, the sunken plains of Sunda, the coastal settlements lost to the Black Sea flood, all fused into one mythic memory. When people spoke of a city that fell beneath the ocean, they were not speaking of a map, but of a moment, the moment the sea reclaimed the world. Plato's tale, then, becomes less about hubris and more about remembrance, an elegy for the age before the waves. And yet, there is something strangely hopeful in the myth's endurance. For over 2,000 years, it has refused to fade, whispering that perhaps what is lost is not gone. The ocean may have taken Atlantis, but it also preserved it, turning stone to coral, walls to reefs, silence to song. When divers descend into the dark blue, when sonar maps the contours of the deep, they are not only searching for a city, they are searching for the memory of home. In the end, it matters little whether Atlantis existed as Plato described. What matters is that it exists in us, in the part of the human spirit that cannot let go of wonder, that insists on believing there was once a place where wisdom and beauty flourished, until the sea came to take it. The story of Atlantis endures because it feels true in a way science alone cannot measure. It speaks to the ancient awareness that our civilizations are fragile, that the ocean is patient, and that every city we build is only temporary land upon an ancient sea. Perhaps the first city ever built still rests beneath the waves, not in legend, but in silence. Perhaps Atlantis is not a myth of arrogance, but a memory of beginning, a dream of where we first became more than wanderers, where we built walls not to divide, but to stay. And when the water rose, the city did not die. It simply returned to the deep, where all things return. Atlantis, then, is not a warning, but a lullaby, the ocean's way of reminding us that what is lost is only waiting. When we listen to the rhythm of the tides, when we feel the pull of the moon, we are hearing the same song that once lulled that city to sleep. The myth is not gone. It is merely resting beneath the surface, patient as the sea, waiting to rise again. Beneath the calm surface of the sea lies a darkness that is not empty, but alive, a quiet filled with the whispers of what came before. For thousands of years, humans could only imagine what rested in that deep silence. Now, with machines that can see without eyes and hands that can touch through metal and signal, we have begun to search the ocean floor for traces of ourselves. The science of underwater archaeology is as much an act of listening as it is of discovery, an attempt to hear the echoes of time through silt and salt, to decipher the faint language of the deep. The ocean conceals nearly everything that once stood near its shores. Entire landscapes now lie drowned beneath its shifting skin, but the sea is not cruel to what it takes. Its coldness slows decay, its darkness preserves. Where the air would have burned away wood and cloth, the sea keeps them wrapped in layers of sediment, untouched by light. In that silence, human traces sleep. Hearts, pottery, walls, bones, waiting to be found by those who know how to read the shadows of the seafloor. Modern explorers descend not in dreams, but in vessels of steel and code. They send sonar pulses through the water, mapping the unseen world with invisible light. These maps reveal strange geometries, terraces, steps, lines too straight to be random. Each shape is a question. Are these the work of currents or of hands? Were they carved by nature or by memory itself? The deep sea does not answer quickly. It makes us wait. Off the coast of India, near the city of Dwarka, divers have found patterns of stone that appear to form streets and walls, traces that some believe match the descriptions in ancient texts of a city lost to the sea. Nearby, in the Gulf of Khambhat, sonar surveys have revealed vast structures beneath the mud, stretching for miles, older than any known civilization in the region. Skeptics say these are only natural formations, sculpted by currents and sediment. But others feel the pull of a deeper story, that what lies there may predate the cities we think of as the first. Far to the east, near the island of Yonaguni in Japan, divers swim among massive stone terraces descending into the deep, steps, platforms, and corridors that seem deliberate, like the ruins of a forgotten temple. Scientists debate endlessly. Are they geological, the result of erosion, or human, carved by an ancient people whose names have vanished? The stones keep their secret. They are too still to argue, too old to care. Whether built or born, they stir something within us, the sense that civilization may be older, far older, than we dare to imagine. In the Black Sea, archaeologists have found the remains of ancient shorelines hundreds of feet below the surface. Evidence suggests that around 7,000 years ago, the sea's waters surged inward from the Mediterranean in a catastrophic flood, drowning villages that once lined its banks. Wooden tools, pottery, and human dwellings now rest in that quiet darkness. For the first time, we can look upon the traces of lives caught between earth and ocean, their world vanishing as ours someday might. The tools of underwater archaeology are instruments of patience. Sonar, magnetometers, remotely operated vehicles, they move slowly, cautiously, over the seabed, scanning for patterns that might mean purpose. When divers descend, their bubbles rise like thoughts returning to the surface. Each artifact lifted from the deep must be handled gently, for water holds memory differently than air. Once brought into light, ancient wood turns to dust within moments unless kept wet. Iron, preserved for millennia in salt water, begins to crumble the instant it feels oxygen. It is as though the past resists being awakened, preferring its dream of darkness. Yet every discovery, however small, changes the story of who we are. A flint knife found in the mud where a sea once met land, a wall buried under coral that still follows the curve of human design, a statue's fragment staring through the silt. Each is a whisper from another age. Science gathers these fragments with care, piecing together not a single city, but a pattern of existence. The enduring instinct to build, to shape, to leave something behind even as the world changes around us. To explore the deep is to confront the limits of knowledge. We have mapped the surfaces of the Moon and Mars in greater detail than the floor of our own oceans. More than 80% of the seafloor remains unseen, unmapped, untouched by human eyes. Somewhere within that immensity, perhaps beneath miles of darkness, lie ruins that could rewrite everything we know of our beginning. Yet to find them is not easy, And perhaps that is right. The ocean is a patient guardian. It reveals its secrets only to those who listen without greed, who move slowly, respectfully, as though entering a sacred place. Underwater archaeologists speak of a kind of reverence that grows the deeper they go. The silence of the ocean presses against them, immense and soft, and in that pressure there is humility. Each time the light of their lamps touches the seafloor, the past glimmers for a heartbeat, a piece of pottery, a carved stone, a shadow of a wall, and then fades again into darkness. It is like seeing time itself breathe. Perhaps the first city ever built still lies there, wrapped in coral and current. Perhaps we have already passed above it without knowing, our sonar signals bouncing softly off its buried walls. The ocean keeps its counsel. Its memory stretches beyond ours, and its patience is infinite. Every dive, every discovery is not just a scientific act, but a conversation, one that takes place between the living and the deep. And when we surface, blinking in the sunlight, the air feels thinner, lighter, more fragile. The ocean remains below, vast and unknowable, carrying within it everything we have forgotten. The archaeology of the abyss is not about finding the past. It is about remembering that it never truly left. The ocean still holds the shapes of our first dreams, the blueprints of our beginnings, resting quietly in the cold, endless dark. The earth once looked entirely different. The maps we hold in our minds, the borders, the shapes of continents, the delicate lacework of coastlines, are only a recent chapter in a much older story. During the last ice age, vast sheets of frozen water locked up the seas, drawing them back from the continents. The ocean was smaller then, and the land stretched farther than we can now imagine. What we call islands were once mountains in sprawling plains, and what we call continental shelves were once fertile valleys, where rivers flowed through forests and grasslands. The world was wide, unbroken, connected. The earth was, quite literally, a single shoreline. Imagine walking across that primeval world. To the north, where the English Channel now swells with gray water, there was open land, Doggerland, a bridge of hills and meadows linking Britain to Europe. It was a place of mammoths and red deer, of humans who followed the herds and built temporary camps along winding rivers. The air would have been sharp, the wind carrying the cries of birds across endless open fields. There was no concept of island or sea, only land stretching beyond sight, a quiet continent of stone and light. Far to the east, another great land bridge united Asia with the islands of what we now call Indonesia. The Sunda Shelf, as scientists name it, was a vast expanse of tropical plains, jungles, and rivers, the cradle of species and perhaps of stories. Here, the ancestors of modern humans traveled, hunted, gathered, and built. They lived close to the ocean's edge, though it was not yet ocean, only a long, low basin where rivers braided through mangroves and deltas. When the sea finally rose, it did not only drown this land. It separated a world into thousands of islands, scattering people and cultures like seeds across the equator. To the north of Australia, the Sahul continent joined New Guinea, Tasmania, and the mainland in one great landmass. People could walk from what is now Port Moresby to what would become Melbourne without crossing a single wave. There were no boundaries except the horizon. The earth was intimate then, smaller in its separations, vast in its wholeness. The human world existed as a network of coasts that had not yet learned to be apart. When the ice began to melt, the world changed shape with terrible grace. Glaciers withdrew like slow tides of stone. Rivers swelled, lakes overflowed, and the sea began its long ascent. What had once been fields became marshes. Marshes became bays. Bays became open sea. The edges of continents retreated in silence. Doggerland shrank to a scattering of hills before vanishing entirely beneath the North Sea. The Sunda Plains dissolved into the scattered islands of Java, Sumatra, and Borneo. Shorelines redrew themselves, rewriting migration, climate, and memory. But it was not only the land that changed, it was humanity. As the world fragmented, so did we. Peoples who once shared common ground were divided by new seas, isolated into islands, forced to adapt, to invent, to remember. This separation birthed languages, myths, and distinct ways of life. It also gave rise to the longing that would define us, the yearning to cross water, to reconnect with what was lost. The human fascination with boats, with exploration, with the endless horizon, began here, when the first lands disappeared beneath the waves. Even now, buried under layers of silt and coral, the traces of that lost world remain. Sonar has revealed ancient river channels beneath the Gulf of Thailand, deltas frozen in time beneath the Java Sea, and shorelines that once framed entire civilizations. In these submerged plains may rest the first true experiments in settled life, early villages where people learned to farm, to trade, to shape stone. Before the rivers were drowned, before the coast dissolved, humanity may already have been building, crafting the first echoes of cities long before Mesopotamia or Egypt. Archaeologists sometimes speak of these vanished lands as the missing chapters of civilization. So much of our history may lie beneath the sea, invisible and silent. Every continental shelf is a half-erased library, its pages softened by salt and sediment. Beneath the waves lie the places where we learned the foundations of what we now call civilization, the balance between movement and stillness, between wandering and belonging. The earth of that age was fluid, impermanent, breathing. There were no fixed coastlines, only shifting boundaries of ice and water. Humanity evolved within this motion, our restlessness shaped by the sea's patience, our adaptability carved by its tides. The ocean gave us both separation and connection, teaching us that what is lost can always be found again in a different form. When scientists reconstruct these ancient maps, they are not only studying geography, they are glimpsing the first network of human belonging. These were the lands where stories of creation were born, where firelight flickered across riverbanks, now buried in coral. Perhaps it was here that humans first looked across the dark water and wondered what lay beyond. Perhaps here, in these lost worlds, the first city was imagined, a place of gathering and permanence in a world of change. If we could walk across those drowned continents now, we might find the beginnings of everything. Stones arranged in circles, pathways marked by fire, echoes of laughter carried in the sediment. We might see that civilization did not begin as a sudden spark, but as a tide, one that rose slowly, persistently, carrying us from hunter to builder, from wanderer to dreamer. The earth that was once a single shoreline has scattered itself into islands, but the memory remains in us. It is why we are drawn to the coast, why the sound of waves feels like home. Somewhere deep within, we remember the time when the land was whole, and the sea was still waiting. The first city may not have been built on land as we know it, but on that shared edge, the meeting place of water and earth, where humanity first learned to stay still long enough to dream. There is a moment deep in the collective memory of humankind when the world began to vanish beneath the waves. It was not a single night, not a single storm, but an age-long awakening to loss. The ice that had once held the oceans captive began to melt, slowly at first, then with accelerating force. Across the continents, rivers ran heavier, floods lingered longer, and the tides crept farther inland each season. Humanity, scattered across the lowlands and valleys of a cooling earth, began to watch their horizons change. For centuries, perhaps millennia, the sea was a silent observer, inching forward grain by grain. Villages that once sat comfortably inland found the shoreline crawling toward them. Forests began to drown at their roots, their trunks rotting in brackish pools. Fishermen noticed new currents where once there were calm shallows. Hunters found their familiar trails turning to mudflats, their campsites lost beneath the first fingers of the tide. The change was patient, almost merciful in its slowness, yet relentless, inevitable. At first, people must have adapted. They moved their camps, built higher on ridges, followed retreating game. The ocean was still a friend then, a source of food and wonder. But as generations passed, it began to swallow not only land, but memory. The old hunting grounds, the sacred stones, the burial mounds, all disappeared beneath the waters. The horizon was no longer a boundary, but a thief. And humanity, for the first time, felt the vastness of loss on a planetary scale. Scientists today call this period the meltwater pulse 1A, a time when global temperatures rose dramatically and sea levels surged more than 20 meters within a few centuries. The planet's great ice sheets collapsed, feeding rivers that poured endlessly into the seas. Coastal plains vanished, entire ecosystems were erased, and the map of the Earth was redrawn in slow motion. But for the people living then, small bands of humans scattered across continents, it must have felt like the end of the world. The myths that survived in later ages bear witness to that fear. Stories of great floods echo across every culture, every language, every shore. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of Utnapishtim, who survived a deluge that erased humankind. In the Hebrew tradition, Noah builds an ark to preserve life from the waters. In India, the story of Manu tells of a man guided by a divine fish to survive the flood that engulfed the earth. In the Pacific Islands in China in the Americas, the same tale repeats. The sea rose and the world was washed clean. What if these were not merely allegories, but memories, distant recollections of the great melt, passed through generations until they became sacred? Myths, after all, are not lies. They are truths shaped by time. The flood may not have been a single event, but a slow disaster so vast that it left a scar in the collective human psyche. We remember it still, in our stories of loss, rebirth, and survival. As the waters advanced, the first coastal settlements, those early clusters of dwellings built near river mouths and estuaries, would have been among the first to disappear. Archaeologists have found hints of their existence. Stone tools on the continental shelves, hearths buried beneath sediment, patterns of habitation abruptly ending in the layers of time that correspond to the melting ice. For every site discovered on land, there may be dozens more drowned beneath the sea, perfectly preserved beneath silt, waiting for rediscovery. Some scientists believe that these lost coasts were the true birthplace of civilization. The rivers that fed them were rich in nutrients. The shorelines offered fish, shellfish, and access to trade. Here, humans may have first settled long enough to cultivate, to store, to build, to imagine permanence. When the waters came, those early experiments in living together were erased, but not forgotten. The instinct remained, carried inland by survivors who rebuilt their lives on higher ground. Perhaps it was they who founded the first inland cities, carrying with them the memory of communities drowned by the sea. Geological evidence shows that the rise of water was not even. In some regions, it was sudden and catastrophic. Around 7,600 years ago, the Mediterranean is believed to have breached the narrow barrier separating it from the Black Sea, pouring in with unimaginable force. In a matter of months, vast tracts of land were inundated. Those who lived along that ancient shoreline would have witnessed mountains of water surging inland, swallowing forests and homes. It is possible, perhaps even likely, that this very event inspired the oldest flood myths we know. Elsewhere, the transformation was quieter, but no less complete. In the North Sea, the slow drowning of Doggerland turned a continent into an island. In Southeast Asia, the Sunda Plains dissolved, reshaping the world's climate and migration patterns. In the Americas, the melting of glaciers reshaped rivers and coasts, displacing tribes and animals alike. Everywhere, the sea was rewriting the earth, and with it, the destiny of our species. For early humans, who had lived in rhythm with the land for tens of thousands of years, this change must have seemed incomprehensible. The earth itself appeared unstable. Solid ground turned to liquid, ancient landmarks erased. And yet, from this chaos emerged a new understanding, that nothing is permanent, that the world breathes and moves, that survival depends on movement and adaptation. In this sense, the flood was both an ending and a beginning. It washed away not only the land, but the illusion of eternal ground. When the waters finally stilled, humanity was scattered, but transformed. We became navigators, storytellers, builders of memory. The sea, once a threat, became a mirror of our resilience. In its depths, we saw both loss and renewal. The first city may have been born not in defiance of a flood, but because of it, a response to impermanence, an attempt to create stability in a world that shifts like the tide. Even now, when we stand by the ocean and watch the horizon breathe, we feel that ancient pulse. The waves rise and fall like the memory of the flood that shaped us. The sea is no longer our enemy, but it remains our teacher. It reminds us that the past is never truly gone, only transformed, resting beneath the surface, waiting to return. Perhaps, somewhere below those waves, the ruins of that first city still lie, a testament not to what was destroyed, but to what endured. The flood did not erase humanity, it defined it. From the waters, we emerged as we are, fragile, curious, and eternally reaching for the shore. Beneath the restless surface of the sea lies a silence, so complete it feels eternal. Light fades within the first few hundred feet, and what remains below is not darkness, but a kind of slow, blue dreaming. Here, in the quiet pressure of the deep, time behaves differently. Sediment settles in fine, whispering layers, century upon century, building a record of the world's forgotten past. Every grain of sand, every fragment of shell, every bone turned to stone, all of it is a syllable in the ocean's unspoken language. This is where the first cities, if they ever existed, would rest, not destroyed, but preserved by the mercy of stillness. Scientists who explore this realm speak often of paradox. The ocean is both the great destroyer and the great protector. Storms erase coastlines in moments, yet in the deep, where light cannot reach, delicate carvings, wooden beams, and pottery shards can remain untouched for millennia. The sea buries what it loves, wrapping the remnants of human life in silt, sealing them away from oxygen, from decay, from the noise of the living world. In this way, the deep ocean is not a grave, but a sanctuary of memory. When we imagine the first city, we often picture something visible: streets, walls, temples rising into the air. But in truth, the most enduring city may be the one that cannot be seen, the one that sleeps beneath the waves, preserved not in grandeur, but in patience. Sonar maps reveal patterns of structure across the seabed that resemble human geometry: grids, terraces, circular enclosures. But the ocean guards its evidence carefully. For every discovery, there is uncertainty. For every image, interpretation. Science must move slowly as the current, for the truth of the deep resists haste. The technology that allows us to see through this darkness is astonishingly sensitive. Multi-beam sonar sends out thousands of sound pulses, painting the unseen terrain with echoes. The resulting images are not photographs, but sound shadows, outlines of what might once have been stone or structure. Magnetic sensors trace the faintest shifts in the seabed's composition, detecting metals or burned clay. Autonomous underwater vehicles, equipped with cameras and lights, drift through the gloom like mechanical fish, mapping, recording, listening. Each fragment of data adds to a mosaic of possibility. What emerges from this work is not certainty, but wonder. Off the coast of India, beneath the murky waters of the Gulf of Khambhat, sonar surveys have revealed symmetrical formations stretching over several miles. Scientists debate whether these are natural geological formations or remnants of a civilization that predates the Indus Valley. In Japan's Yanaguni Monument, immense stair-like formations plunge into the sea, so geometric that many divers swear they are man-made. Yet geologists, cautious and methodical, suggest they may be the result of tectonic fracturing and erosion. Both explanations hold truth, perhaps even coexist. The sea does not differentiate between art and accident. The Black Sea offers a quieter mystery. There, beneath layers of oxygen-depleted water, lie shipwrecks so perfectly preserved that their ropes and wooden hulls remain intact after thousands of years. The same chemistry that keeps these ships whole could just as easily preserve an ancient settlement, frozen in time beneath the mud. Archaeologists have discovered ancient shorelines deep below the surface, dotted with evidence of human life, pottery shards, hearthstones, remnants of dwellings. It is as if the sea has been keeping a careful record, holding on to the details until we are ready to listen. The Mediterranean, too, has its secrets. Off the coast of Egypt, the lost city of Heracleion was discovered only in 2001, after centuries of speculation. For over 1,000 years, it lay beneath the waters of Abu Qir Bay, perfectly preserved under a layer of sediment. When divers uncovered its colossal statues, temple ruins, and inscriptions, it was as though history itself had exhaled. Heraclean was not mythical, not imagined, merely sleeping. The discovery proved that entire urban worlds could vanish beneath the sea, waiting to be found. If such a city from the time of the pharaohs could hide so completely, what older cities might still rest farther out, deeper still? But perhaps the most haunting aspect of the ocean's preservation is its silence. On land, ruins crumble and fade, their stories exposed to wind and rain. Underwater, there is only stillness. Movements are slow, deliberate. Time itself feels suspended. Archaeologists who dive into these spaces often describe a sensation of entering another world, one untouched by the noise of modernity. The faint outlines of walls, the glimmer of ancient tools, the soft hum of sonar pulses, all of it exists in a near-sacred quiet. The ocean seems to hold its breath as they work. There is poetry in this preservation. The sea, which once took everything from humanity, land, homes, memory, also offers it back in perfect condition. It is as if the ocean, in its vast intelligence, understood that time needed places to rest. In its depths, human history finds refuge. Wooden artifacts that would have rotted in air lie unspoiled beneath layers of silt. Seeds, textiles, even traces of pigments have survived where the water is cold and still. Some researchers believe that deep marine sediments could preserve evidence of human culture far older than any known civilization, perhaps even traces of pre-Ice Age societies. The more we study these silent archives, the more we realize how incomplete our timeline truly is. We think of civilization as a ladder, beginning in Mesopotamia, climbing through Egypt and Greece toward modernity. But the ocean suggests something more cyclical, that civilizations may have risen and fallen before, their stories erased not by time, but by tides. The deep sea, in this light, becomes the library of forgotten epochs, a place where the first experiments of human order may still sleep, perfectly kept beneath the weight of the world. To study the deep ocean is to confront humility. We know so little, less, in fact, than we know of Mars or the Moon. More than 80% of our seafloor remains unmapped, unseen. Every expedition uncovers anomalies, structures, and signals that challenge our understanding of geology and history alike. Yet the sea does not give up its truths easily. It asks us to move slowly, to observe, to listen. In its silence, we learn patience. In its vastness, perspective. Perhaps the first city ever built was not lost but transformed, its stones softened, its streets turned to reefs, its walls home now to coral and fish. In the deep stillness, life continues in another form, carrying the pattern of human intention into the natural order. The ocean does not destroy, it repurposes. In that endless blue archive, the difference between ruin and creation becomes meaningless. And so we continue to search, guided by sonar, by myth, by the quiet conviction that somewhere, beneath the shifting layers of salt and time, the story of our true beginning is waiting. Perfectly preserved, perfectly still, a city made not of stone, but of memory. There are places where science and myth overlap, so precisely that the boundary between them dissolves. The ocean, vast and secretive, has always invited both curiosity and imagination. Every culture that has looked out across its horizon has filled it with stories, of cities lost beneath the waves, of gods and floods, of civilizations swallowed and reborn. These myths, scattered like driftwood across time, share a common rhythm. Something magnificent is built, then lost, then remembered in whispers. And in those whispers, perhaps, lies the faint outline of truth. The most famous of these stories comes from Plato. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE, he speaks of Atlantis, a great island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, rich in wisdom and power, whose people grew proud and impious. In a single day and night of misfortune, he says, Atlantis sank beneath the sea. For over 2,000 years, scholars, explorers, and dreamers have searched for it. Some say it was merely allegory, a cautionary tale about hubris and decay. Others have sought its ruins in every ocean, from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean to the Caribbean. But what if Atlantis was not just one place? What if it was a memory, a collective echo of the world's drowned coastlines? Long before Plato, flood legends already existed. The Sumerian Genesis, older even than the Epic of Gilgamesh, tells of a deluge that destroyed the early cities of humankind. In Hindu scripture, Manu is warned by a divine fish of an impending flood that will cleanse the earth. The Greeks had Deucalion and Pyrrha. The Maya spoke of the destruction of a wooden people by the waters. And the Aboriginal Australians tell of seas that swallowed their ancestors hunting plains. Across continents, across languages, the same memory surfaces. Water rising, land disappearing, life beginning anew. Modern science lends these myths a strange credibility. Geological evidence confirms that between 12,000 and 7,000 years ago, precisely when these stories may have first emerged, the planet's seas rose by more than 400 feet. Entire regions, from Southeast Asia's Sunda Shelf to the Persian Gulf Basin, were transformed from fertile valleys into oceanic depths. Coastal peoples, displaced by the advancing tides, would have carried their stories inland. In each retelling, the flood became more than an event. It became a symbol, a language of loss and rebirth that encoded our deepest understanding of change. In India's southern coast, near Puampuar, sonar surveys have revealed submerged structures resembling ancient streets and walls, aligned with mathematical precision. The local Tamil legends speak of Kumari Kandam, a great land south of the continent, home to an advanced civilization that vanished beneath the sea. Historians long dismissed this as myth, yet the patterns of the seabed tell a subtler story. They speak of an older shoreline, now buried, and of human presence in a time before written history. Could the memory of Kumari Kandam be a poetic record of those ancient floods, a retelling of what the ocean took? In Japan, the Yonaguni Monument evokes similar wonder. Divers swim through terraces and steps that seem to spiral downward into the abyss, their edges too sharp, too deliberate, to be coincidence. The currents here are strong, the water dim, and yet the site feels alive with presence, as though the stones remember the hands that shaped them. Geologists argue that the formations are natural, carved by millennia of current and quake. But others point to carvings, to straight lines and platform-like arrangements, and ask whether human creativity might have worked alongside nature. Perhaps, as with all myths, both are true, an interplay between what the earth made and what humans imagined upon it. The Mediterranean holds its own legends. Near the islands of Santorini, archaeologists uncovered Akrotiri, a Bronze Age city buried beneath volcanic ash. Streets, homes, frescoes, and vessels remain astonishingly intact, frozen at the moment of disaster. Some have linked this eruption, one of the largest in human history, to Plato's account of Atlantis. The timeline may differ, but the essence is familiar: a thriving civilization undone by the elements, a city lost to nature's deep breath. Whether Atlantis was real or symbolic, it reflects a universal truth, that creation and destruction dance together, inseparable, like waves on the same tide. Even in the Americas, echoes of this pattern persist. The Muisca people of Colombia spoke of Chipchicum, a deity who punished human arrogance by flooding the world. The Hopi of the Southwest told of 3 worlds destroyed before the present one, the third ending in a flood that reshaped the earth. Far north, the Inuit remember times when the sea advanced across the tundra, forcing migrations that became part of their sacred history. Myths, when repeated across the planet, are rarely coincidence. They are the ocean speaking through us, its voice translated into story. Science may describe the rise of the seas with equations and timelines, but myth gives it heart. Together, they form a kind of harmony: data and dream, evidence and echo. The melting of the ice sheets is recorded in layers of coral and isotope, but it is also recorded in language, in the metaphors of cleansing, renewal, and divine retribution that fill our oldest stories. Perhaps those who lived through the floods needed more than explanation. They needed meaning. They needed to believe that the sea rose for a reason. When we look at the ocean today, it's easy to separate the scientific from the mythical, to say that sonar and sensors belong to reason, while stories belong to imagination. Yet, in truth, they both serve the same purpose: to remember. Science reconstructs the shape of the lost coastlines. Myth reconstructs the feeling of losing them. One gives us maps, the other gives us mourning. Between them, a fuller truth emerges, one that speaks not only of water and stone, but of what it means to be human in a world that constantly changes. Perhaps Atlantis was not a single city, but all cities. Every shore swallowed by the tide, every culture erased by time, every memory turned to salt. Perhaps it was never a warning about pride, but a remembrance of fragility. The sea does not destroy in anger. It moves as it always has, in rhythm with the planet's breath. We are the ones who mistake the motion of the world for punishment. And yet, within these myths of loss lies a quiet hope. Each flood story ends not with extinction, but renewal. The waters recede, the survivors begin again, the earth is made fresh. The same pattern may hold for civilization itself, each cycle of creation and collapse a tide within the longer rhythm of human time. The ocean erases, but it also inspires. It cleanses the world of its excess, and then hands it back, reborn. So when we listen to the waves today, we are not just hearing water. We are hearing the oldest story ever told, the story of loss, remembrance, and return. A story that began when the ice melted, when the first cities were drowned, when the first myths were born. The ocean has always spoken in metaphor, and perhaps Atlantis, that shimmering city beneath the sea, is not a place to be found, but a truth to be remembered, that everything we build, no matter how great, must one day become part of the tide. Long before the first brick was laid in Mesopotamia, long before the pyramids rose against the Egyptian sky, humans were building, but not in ways we easily recognize. The first city may not have been a city of stone and mortar at all, but of intention and imagination, a pattern laid on the landscape with care and repetition. Perhaps it existed along a river that no longer flows, in a valley now drowned beneath the tides, or on a coastal plain whose soil has been swept into the sea. Its streets and walls may have been simple, impermanent, yet they carried the first glimmer of what it means to settle, to create a place that endures beyond a single lifetime. Archaeology teaches us that settlement often precedes civilization. Early humans were semi-nomadic, following herds and seasons, yet evidence shows that they returned to certain places again and again, laying stones for hearths, arranging dwellings in small clusters, and planting seeds in the earth. These patterns, repeated across generations, are the first whispers of community. A city is not only stone, it is shared memory, organized labor, and the understanding that some places are worth keeping. Perhaps these early settlements existed on lands now submerged, erased from sight, but preserved by the patient hand of the ocean. The transition from transient camps to permanent settlement was gradual and deeply influenced by the environment. Rivers offered food, irrigation, and transportation. Coasts offered fish, salt, and trade routes. Wherever humans first realized the advantage of staying in one place, they may have started to organize their surroundings, shaping the landscape to suit both practical and social needs. Stones were arranged for protection, for ceremony, for storage. Boundaries were marked to define space. Fire was harnessed not just for warmth, but as a center of gathering and ritual. This was the first architecture, not monumental, but profoundly human. Now imagine such a settlement on a land that no longer exists. Doggerland, the Sunda Shelf, the coastlines of the Black Sea. These were places rich in life and opportunity, yet destined to be lost to rising water. Their inhabitants may have been among the first to experiment with the foundations of urban life, communal organization, permanent dwellings, and shared cultural practices. Archaeologists have recovered tools, pottery, and burial sites from these submerged plains, fragments of lives once intimately connected to the rhythms of the land and sea. Every artifact is a signpost, a clue pointing to the possibility of the first city. The very notion of a city is flexible. We think of walls, streets, and governance, but early cities may have been much simpler. clusters of homes surrounding a communal hearth, or small temples aligned with rivers and stars. What matters is the conscious shaping of space, the recognition that humans could organize themselves not only for survival, but for meaning. This impulse may have arisen first along coastlines that are now invisible, beneath waters that remember our earliest attempts to create permanence in a transient world. Consider the role of memory. When a flood claimed land, it did not only erase buildings, it displaced knowledge, stories, and practice. Survivors would carry these memories inland, rebuilding in safer places. Perhaps Mesopotamia, often credited as the birthplace of civilization, inherited lessons from these lost coasts. Perhaps the first attempts at urban planning, communal living, and ritual architecture were practiced in places now hidden beneath the ocean. The first city, in this sense, was not a single location, but a concept, refined through generations of adaptation and survival. Underwater surveys provide tantalizing hints. In regions such as the Gulf of Khambhat in India, sonar has revealed formations that suggest streets and walls submerged for thousands of years. In the Black Sea, sunken shorelines with evidence of habitation hint at communities erased by the sudden rise of water. Even if we cannot yet confirm a single first city, these sites reveal patterns of human organization that predate known civilizations. They suggest that permanence, planning, and cultural continuity were ideas already in motion long before the written record. There is a poetic symmetry to this. The ocean, which took the first coasts, also preserved them. While time on land is harsh, eroding, decaying, scattering, the sea keeps what it claims, hidden but intact. In this way, submerged settlements are both lost and eternal, simultaneously forgotten and preserved. They exist in a kind of suspended animation, waiting for discovery, waiting for memory to catch up to time. The first city, then, may have been a modest place, yet monumental in human significance. It was a proof of concept that people could organize themselves, shape their environment, and leave traces that endure beyond a single life. Its walls may have been drowned, its streets silted over, but its legacy survives in every community that followed. Every village, town, and metropolis we build today is part of a continuum that stretches back to those earliest experiments in permanence. Finally, imagine standing on a modern shore, watching the waves rise and fall, feeling the rhythm of the tides. Beneath that surface may rest streets laid millennia ago, homes constructed by hands we will never see, and the first collective effort to build a city. The ocean has taken them, but in taking, it has also safeguarded them. Perhaps this is the true nature of human endurance, that even when our cities vanish, even when the earth itself reshapes, the essence of what we create persists, hidden yet alive, beneath the patient, remembering waves. There is a quiet majesty in imagining the first city, not as a monument of stone or gold, but as a living, breathing organism, a place where human life, memory, and imagination converged. Long before the grand cities of Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the Indus Valley, there may have existed a settlement that carried the first whispers of community. Perhaps it was built along a river no longer flowing, a coastline long since drowned, or a fertile valley swallowed by the rising tide. Its walls were humble, its streets unpaved, yet it embodied something far greater than its physical form. The first conscious attempt to create permanence in a world defined by change. Humans are, at heart, creatures of memory and anticipation. We build because we wish to leave something behind, to make the transient endure. Even the earliest settlements reflect this impulse. Hearths were carefully placed, dwellings clustered, paths repeated generation after generation. The organization of space was not random, it carried meaning. Rituals may have taken place in central gathering spaces, marking cycles of life and death, of seasons and celestial rhythms. The city was not just a shelter, but a mind made manifest, a reflection of thought made tangible. Yet the first city may have been doomed from its inception. It existed in a world of shifting coastlines and melting ice, where land could vanish within a few generations. The people who built it would have known the land intimately, its rivers, its soils, its patterns of wind and sun, and yet they were powerless before the slow, relentless rise of the sea. This tension between human intention and natural forces is essential to understanding the city's character. It was ephemeral yet defiant, fragile yet ambitious, alive with the awareness that permanence is an illusion, and that to build is, in itself, an act of hope. Archaeological evidence hints at this fragile defiance. In the Black Sea, submerged shorelines have revealed evidence of settlements that existed before catastrophic flooding. Houses, pottery, tools, and hearths lie buried beneath layers of silt, perfectly preserved in the oxygen-poor depths. In the Gulf of Khambhat, sonar surveys have suggested formations that resemble streets, walls, and even harbors, structures that may date back thousands of years before the Indus Valley civilization. These discoveries suggest that humans were experimenting with settlement and urban planning long before we thought possible. The first city, in this sense, is not a single point on a map, but a concept, an idea that emerged wherever humans began to settle long enough to organize space, labor, and community. It is the recognition that cooperation and permanence can coexist, that humans are capable of shaping their environment not merely to survive, but to create meaning. This early understanding is the seed from which all later civilizations grew, a quiet yet monumental achievement buried beneath millennia of sediment and memory. What would life have been like in such a city? Families may have gathered around communal fires, sharing food, stories, and songs. Tools and pottery were crafted not only for necessity, but for beauty and utility. Walls may have been simple, yet intentional, delineating space, providing safety, and signaling belonging. The rhythms of life would have followed natural cycles, the rising sun, the ebbing tide, the turning seasons, each day reinforcing the human connection to both the land and each other. It was a city attuned to the world's pulse, alive in ways we struggle to measure today. And yet, the sea was always a silent presence. Its slow rise would have intruded on daily life in subtle but persistent ways. Flooded fields, shifting shorelines, and disappearing landmarks would have forced adaptations. The city may have moved incrementally, rebuilding on higher ground, abandoning areas once thought permanent. This constant negotiation with the natural world may have shaped the earliest forms of urban resilience, the understanding that a city is never complete, that it must evolve with the environment. In imagining this city, we also imagine its loss. Rising waters eventually claimed Doggerland, Sunda, and countless other prehistoric landscapes. The first city, if it existed in these places, was swallowed by the sea, its streets silenced, its dwellings reclaimed by nature. And yet, in its disappearance, it persisted, not as a physical presence, but as a memory encoded in human imagination. Stories of floods, lost lands, and vanished communities echo this persistence, transforming history into myth, and myth into the enduring human awareness of fragility and resilience. The first city teaches us something profound about our relationship with the natural world. It reminds us that the impulse to build, to organize, to create is inseparable from the awareness of impermanence. The very act of settlement is a conversation with forces far greater than ourselves: ice, water, wind, time. By attempting to impose order, humans learned adaptability, foresight, and cooperation. In its ruins, whether on land or under the sea, the first city embodies both ambition and humility. Perhaps what makes the first city truly remarkable is not its architecture, but its legacy. Every community that followed, from the ziggurats of Sumer to the stone circles of the British Isles, from the Indus Valley's grid-like streets to the villages of ancient China, carries forward the same experiment, creating permanence, community, and meaning in a shifting world. The first city was a prototype, an idea tested on the edges of continents and coastlines, preserved beneath layers of water and sediment, and passed forward through the generations that survived its disappearance. And when we imagine it today, we are participating in the same impulse that first drove humans to settle. We peer beneath the waves with sonar, dive into the abyss with lights and cameras, and map submerged valleys and shorelines. Each discovery is an act of remembrance, a conversation across millennia. The first city, though invisible to our eyes, continues to shape us, not as ruins we can walk through, but as a memory we can feel, an idea that resonates in every stone we place, every path we trace, every community we build. Perhaps the first city sleeps still beneath the ocean, its streets soft with silt, its walls encrusted with coral. It is invisible, yet alive in a way the land-based ruins cannot be. Preserved by water, remembered by humans, and waiting, patient as the tide, to teach us once more about beginnings, impermanence, and the enduring power of human hope. The ocean has always been both a cradle and a grave for human history. Its vastness evokes wonder and fear in equal measure, a living archive that preserves what we thought lost. Beneath the waves lie landscapes that were once bustling with life, cities that may have existed long before the ones we study today, and the traces of a human imagination daring to impose order on the world. These submerged spaces are not only repositories of artifacts, they are monuments to memory itself, telling stories that stretch across millennia and reminding us that civilization has always been intertwined with water. The sea is patient. It does not rush, it does not demand. Sediment settles slowly, layer upon layer, creating a natural record of what was. Pottery shards, tools, wooden beams, and even the faintest traces of organic material can remain untouched for thousands of years, held in the quiet, oxygen-poor embrace of the deep. Unlike the land, which exposes artifacts to wind, rain, and human interference, the ocean protects, wrapping the remnants of human life in a slow, deliberate preservation. In this sense, the sea is both a vault and a library, holding secrets that we are only beginning to read. Archaeological discoveries in submerged regions hint at civilizations far older than those recorded in texts. Off the coast of India, the Gulf of Khambhat reveals sonar images of structures that may stretch for miles, forming patterns reminiscent of streets and organized settlements. In Japan, the terraces of Yanaguni plunge deep into the water, their shapes so precise that they provoke both awe and debate. Are these natural formations sculpted by time, or the remnants of human hands? Perhaps, as with many things, the answer lies somewhere in between, the ocean itself shaping what humans built, transforming cities into living monuments of stone and water. The Black Sea tells a similarly compelling story. Geologists have found submerged shorelines and settlements that date back to the end of the last ice age. These sites were inundated during a sudden rise in water levels, preserving dwellings and artifacts in a state of near-perfect stasis. Hearthstones, pottery, and wooden tools rest beneath layers of mud, untouched by decay. Here, the first cities could have existed, their streets quietly buried by the sea, waiting for discovery. The evidence suggests that humans were settling and organizing long before the rise of Mesopotamian cities, perhaps experimenting with the first ideas of communal life along coasts that no longer exist. The preservation of these submerged settlements challenges our understanding of history. Civilizations are rarely linear. They are cyclical, fragile, and constantly interacting with the environment. The first city may not have left monumental ruins visible above ground, but it left traces in the ocean's embrace, evidence of an early attempt to shape society, to create order, and to leave a mark on the world. These cities, though hidden, are no less real than the pyramids or ziggurats. They represent the earliest experiments in permanence, community, and human ingenuity. Consider the psychology of early settlers. Living on coasts, they were intimately aware of the forces that could erase everything they built. Rising tides, storms, and seasonal floods were constant reminders of impermanence. Yet they built anyway, organizing dwellings, storing food, marking sacred spaces, and establishing social practices. The act of settlement itself was a declaration. Life matters, memory matters, human intention matters. This is the essence of the first city, an assertion of presence in a world that is always in motion. The ocean, in return, preserves these assertions in a unique way. A submerged city is not only protected from decay, it is insulated from the distortions of history. On land, stones can be moved, walls demolished, and evidence scattered. Underwater, the sea holds fast. The first city, resting beneath the waves, becomes a silent teacher, demonstrating to us the resilience of human effort and the patience of the natural world. Archaeologists who explore these depths speak of a reverence unlike any other, as if entering a sacred space that belongs to both the past and the present. Yet the ocean also challenges our perception of what a city is. We often think of urban life as grand, monumental, and permanent. The first city may have been modest in comparison, a cluster of huts around a hearth, paths worn into the soil, communal spaces for gathering and ceremony. Its importance lies not in size or splendor, but in the conscious effort to build a shared space, to establish memory, and to create continuity across generations. The ocean preserves these subtleties, giving them weight and significance long after they were lost to sight. Every submerged site is a lesson in humility. Humans are transient, water is enduring. Civilizations rise and fall, yet the ocean keeps its record. It reminds us that permanence is not guaranteed, that the earth reshapes itself with quiet inevitability, and that the structures we build, no matter how ambitious, are always subject to the currents of time. The first city, in this light, is less a monument than a meditation on human perseverance and vulnerability. And perhaps this is why the myth of Atlantis resonates so deeply. Plato's tale captures not only the grandeur and hubris of a city, but its disappearance into the sea, a narrative echoed by countless cultures worldwide. The first city may never be discovered in the exact form it once held, but the memory of building, organizing, and striving persists. Beneath the waves, the ocean safeguards these memories, transforming physical ruins into enduring ideas. As we explore submerged landscapes, we glimpse a different history, one in which humans have long been experimenting with permanence, cooperation, and imagination. The first city may be lost to sight, but it endures in purpose, pattern, and legacy. It teaches us that civilization is not merely architecture. It is a continuous conversation with time, place, and nature, preserved patiently beneath the patient, remembering sea. There's a rhythm to the sea that has guided humanity from the very beginning, a pulse that mirrors our own attempts to settle, to create, to endure. Along every coastline, rivers, and estuary where humans first gathered, the ocean played a dual role, provider and destroyer, protector and eraser. Its tides brought food, fertile soil, and transportation, yet its rising waters could, and often did, reclaim the lands where settlements flourished. The first city may have emerged in this tension, a delicate balance between human ingenuity and nature's inexorable force. Imagine a coastline thousands of years ago, gentle waves lapping against a rich plain, forests sheltering game, and rivers winding toward the horizon. Here, humans established the first clusters of homes, rudimentary, yes, but deliberate in their placement. Hearths were arranged to share warmth and light, paths were etched by repeated use, and storage pits held seeds, grain, and tools. Social spaces existed, perhaps in the form of communal gathering areas or ritual circles, where the community could share knowledge, celebrate, mourn, and plan. This was civilization in its infancy, fragile, fleeting, yet profound. Water, both immediate and distant, defined every aspect of these early settlements. People depended on rivers and coastal ecosystems for survival. Fish, shellfish, and salt were staples. Fertile floodplains yielded crops that allowed for semi-permanent habitation. Yet the same waters carried a constant reminder of impermanence. Rising tides, storms, and seasonal floods were not abstractions. They were forces that could undo years of labor within a single season. The first city was built in dialogue with these forces, and its design, however simple, reflected an understanding of risk, adaptation, and resilience. Submerged landscapes now reveal traces of these early interactions. Off the coast of India, sonar imaging shows long linear formations beneath sediment, suggesting streets or walls laid with intention. In Japan, the steppe terraces of Yonaguni descend into the blue, their symmetry provoking questions that remain unanswered. Natural formations shaped by tectonic activity or deliberate human architecture. In the Black Sea, ancient shorelines hold preserved dwellings and tools, resting quietly under oxygen-poor layers of water and mud. Each of these sites hints at early experiments in permanence, organization, and community, the building blocks of what we recognize as civilization. The first city was not merely a physical construction. It was a social experiment. By creating shared spaces, humans learned cooperation, governance, and the distribution of resources. Boundaries were defined, both physical and social, shaping who could enter, who could contribute, and who could benefit. These early settlements were laboratories for human organization, places where society learned to function collectively, even in the face of environmental uncertainty. Every path trodden repeatedly, every hearth built with care, every communal activity reinforced the patterns that would later define larger urban centers. Yet even as humans built, the ocean reminded them of its authority. Rising seas transformed fertile plains into shallow bays. Estuaries expanded into lagoons. Coasts receded. Communities that once thrived were forced to relocate, abandon their constructions, or adapt in ways that changed culture and practice. This was not only a physical challenge, but a psychological one. The first city existed in awareness of its own fragility. Its builders had to reconcile ambition with humility, permanence with impermanence, and vision with mortality. Modern science allows us to glimpse these vanished landscapes. By combining sonar imaging, submersible exploration, and sediment analysis, researchers reconstruct ancient coastlines and hypothesize the placement of early settlements. In doing so, they reveal a pattern. Humans have long sought to settle near water, yet water has consistently tested the limits of their endeavors. The first city may now be buried beneath the waves, but its memory persists in the way later civilizations approached urban planning, resource management, and environmental adaptation. There is also a poetic resonance in this preservation. The ocean, which erased the first city from sight, has also safeguarded it, holding its traces in stasis. Sediment layers act as a slow-moving archive, capturing the minutiae of daily life, tools abandoned in haste, the remains of meals, footprints pressed into soft soil. Unlike terrestrial ruins, which crumble and fade under wind and rain, submerged settlements remain largely untouched, waiting for humans to rediscover them. In this way, the ocean becomes both witness and custodian, maintaining the first city long after its people have vanished. To imagine life in the first city is to imagine a community attuned to its environment, aware of the rhythm of tides, the migration of animals, the cycles of seasons. Architecture was modest, but meaningful, tools practical yet crafted with care, and social cohesion central to survival. Every act of building, every repetition of routine, every shared ritual was a declaration. We exist here, we endure, and we remember. The city's essence was not grandeur, but presence, the conscious organization of human life in dialogue with the natural world. Ultimately, the first city teaches us that civilization is more than monuments and records. It is a mindset. It is the willingness to settle, to collaborate, to create spaces imbued with memory and meaning, even when the land itself is impermanent. Its disappearance beneath the waves does not diminish its significance. Rather, it elevates it, reminding us that human ingenuity and resilience are measured not only by what survives above ground, but by what endures through preservation, memory, and imagination. The ocean has claimed much of our earliest history, yet in doing so, it has offered us something profound, a silent archive of human ambition, a record of our first attempts at permanence, and a reminder that the act of building, of organizing, of creating community is itself a triumph. Beneath the waves, the first city waits, quiet, patient, and eternal, a testament to humanity's enduring desire to leave a mark, to create order, and to be remembered. The first city, lost to the ocean's patient embrace, carries with it a lesson about the fragility and resilience of human ambition. Civilization, we often think, is a series of monuments and records, yet the essence of the first city was subtler. It was about people learning to live together, to organize labor, to create meaning in a world that was constantly shifting beneath their feet. The rising seas may have claimed their walls and streets, yet the knowledge, the habits, and the collective spirit endured, carried inland by survivors, echoed in stories, and eventually encoded in myth. Imagine walking through such a settlement long ago. The homes would have been modest, constructed from wood, clay, and stone, carefully arranged to make the most of natural light, shelter, and airflow. Pathways were not paved, but etched into the soil by repeated footsteps. Central hearths provided warmth, light, and a place for communal gathering. Tools and pottery were practical, yet crafted with attention, revealing not only necessity, but also care and intention. Even the smallest actions, laying a stone, tending a fire, sharing food, were part of an ongoing experiment in permanence, community, and social cohesion. The city's relationship with water was profound. Rivers and coastlines provided sustenance, transportation, and a connection to distant lands. At the same time, they were a constant reminder of vulnerability. Seasonal floods, rising tides, and sudden storms could destroy entire sections of the settlement, forcing inhabitants to adapt, rebuild, or migrate. This dialogue between human agency and natural forces shaped not only the city's physical structure, but also its culture. Early inhabitants learned to anticipate change, to respect the rhythm of the world, and to build in harmony with the environment rather than in defiance of it. Submerged landscapes today reveal traces of this delicate balance. Sonar imaging and underwater archaeology uncover patterns that hint at streets, walls, and dwellings carefully arranged to optimize space and function. In regions like the Gulf of Khambhat in India, formations suggest the possibility of large, organized settlements, their streets and terraces hinting at urban planning far older than any previously documented civilization. In the Black Sea, sunken shorelines preserve hearths and artifacts, offering a window into daily life at the edge of human permanence. Each discovery underscores the idea that the impulse to build, to create order, community, and meaning, predates known history. The first city may have been modest in scale, yet monumental in human significance. Its builders were experimenting with social structures, shared resources, and communal identity. They were learning, consciously or intuitively, the principles that would underpin every subsequent civilization: cooperation, foresight, adaptability, and the capacity to create spaces imbued with shared memory. In this sense, the first city was less about architecture and more about humanity itself, a template for what it means to organize life in a fragile, ever-changing world. Its disappearance beneath the waves was not the end of its influence. Survivors carried knowledge, practices, and traditions to new lands, adapting to shifting environments while preserving the essence of settlement. Flood myths, passed down orally across generations and continents, may encode fragments of memory from these early experiences. Plato's Atlantis, the flood stories of the Black Sea, the legends of Kandam, and other submerged lands could all be echoes of the first city's fate, narratives preserving the memory of human ingenuity challenged by natural forces. The preservation of the first city beneath the ocean also speaks to the remarkable patience of nature. Submerged under silt, the city's remains were shielded from wind, rain, and decay, creating a slow-motion archive of human endeavor. Tools, pottery, hearths, and even the faintest impressions of paths were preserved for thousands of years, untouched by the passing of civilizations on land. In this sense, the ocean is both grave and guardian, a living repository that holds our earliest experiments in permanence and community. The first city also teaches us about resilience. Its builders were not deterred by impermanence. They experimented, adapted, and rebuilt, knowing that survival required both flexibility and foresight. This mindset, developed in response to the constant movement of water, was perhaps humanity's first lesson in urban resilience. Later civilizations would inherit this knowledge, consciously or unconsciously, as they built along rivers, floodplains, and coasts, repeating the ancient dialogue between human ambition and environmental forces. To imagine the first city is to imagine human life in its most intimate and experimental form. It is a place where daily routines, social cohesion, and environmental awareness intersected. It is where people first tested the boundaries of permanence, where the earliest forms of community emerged, and where the impulse to leave a mark, to assert existence in a transient world, first took shape. Its streets may now be silted over, its walls submerged, but its essence persists in the patterns of human settlement that followed. And perhaps the most profound lesson of all is this. The first city reminds us that permanence is never guaranteed, yet the effort to build, organize, and create meaning is itself enduring. Even beneath the waves, where the physical structures have vanished, the city lives on as a testament to human hope, ingenuity, and adaptability. It is a quiet, patient teacher, showing us that even in a world of change, the impulse to create, to settle, and to connect endures, a rhythm as steady and eternal as the tides themselves. And so, the story of the first city comes to rest not in stone or story alone, but in the quiet memory of the ocean. The waves rise and fall, carrying whispers of a civilization that once existed at the edge of human knowledge, a settlement shaped by intention, necessity, and the unyielding rhythm of nature. Beneath the tides, streets sleep beneath layers of silt, hearts lie frozen in time, and tools crafted by human hands wait patiently to tell their tale. The city may be lost to our eyes, but it endures in the water, in the sediment, and in the imagination of those who seek it. Its disappearance beneath the waves is not an erasure, but a transformation. The first city lives on through the people who survived, through the stories passed from one generation to another, and through the myths that echo its memory across the globe. Each flood legend, each ancient tale of land swallowed by water, carries the essence of a city built with hope, only to be reclaimed by the sea. These narratives are reminders that impermanence does not negate significance, that even in loss, meaning can endure. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the first city is humility. Humanity has always strived to impose order on the world, to settle, to build, and to endure. Yet nature moves at a scale and rhythm beyond our control. Rising seas, shifting landscapes, and the slow passage of time remind us that nothing is fixed, that every achievement is temporary. And yet, it is precisely this tension between fragility and perseverance that defines the human story. To build is to assert hope against uncertainty, to declare presence in a world that will inevitably change. The first city also reminds us of patience. The ocean preserves what the land cannot, offering a quiet archive for those who are willing to look. Artifacts, structures, and traces of early life rest beneath its surface, waiting for discovery, waiting for understanding. In this preservation, there is a kind of eternity, not of permanence above ground, but of continuity beneath it. The city story is not erased. It is paused, a memory held by the tides until humanity is ready to remember. And so, as we stand at the water's edge, listening to the gentle rhythm of the waves, we are connected to that first city. We feel the pulse of lives long past, of communities that dreamed of permanence, and of the unbroken human desire to leave a mark on the world. The ocean carries both loss and hope, destruction and preservation, silence and memory. It teaches us that while the cities we build may one day disappear, the act of creating, organizing, and imagining endures, as enduring as the tides, as timeless as the sea itself.